Today's daf is daf Lamed Vav, and we're on the third line down from the top. What we need to know by way of introduction is that we had a brisa that lists those nashim, those women who do not receive knas. And the brisa had subdivided it into two categories, arayos and shnios larayos. The Gemara rejected its first possibility, and now we're up to the second possibility. Ella, the Gemara suggests arayos chayve mises bezdin, shnios chayve krisos. So we're dealing with doraisas for sure, and shnios are considered a secondary category, even though they're doraisa, because they don't have a chiyuv misa, but rather a chiyuv kares. Like, for example, haba al achosam, as we discussed. In these cases, and only in these two categories of cases, there's no knas. Aval chayve lavim, the implication of this price is that if we go down one level on the hierarchy on this totem pole, then we end up in chayve lavim and yeshlem knas. In that case, he will pay a knas. And now the Gemara enters into the machlokes between Shimon HaTeimani and Rab Shimon ben Manasseh. Mani, who is the author of this brisa, Shimon HaTimni, he understood that the interdependence of knas and marriage, in which the Torah says v'lo sia le'isha, should be understood as isha sheyesh ba havaya, which means only a woman who is included in havaya, meaning kedushin tovsin ba, only in that case will he pay knas. And chayve lavim is kedushin tovsin ba, therefore he pays knas, and it works out very well according to Shimon HaTimni. However, this could not be attributed to the bar plukta, the dissenting view of Rab Shimon ben Manasseh, because according to Rab Shimon ben Manasseh, when it says v'lo sia le'isha, it means isha ra'uya lo, and certainly chayve lavim does not fit that category, and therefore, according to Rab Shimon ben Manasseh, there would be no knas in the case of chayve lavim. So the nafkamina now between Shimon HaTimni and Rab Shimon ben Manasseh would be the case of chayve lavim, according to Shimon HaTimni, since we're dealing with a case of kedushin tovsin ba, that means yesh ba havaya, therefore there would be knas. Whereas according to Rab Shimon ben Manasseh, who interprets v'lo sia le'isha as isha ra'uya lo, then certainly chayve lavim does not qualify as isha ra'uya lo, hence there is no knas. Ika diamri, now we're going to throw out another possibility as to how to understand these two categories where there's no knas. Arayos and shnios arayos. Arayos chayve mises bezin v'chayve krisus. So now that original top category includes not just chayve mises bezin, but also chayve krisus. And then we go down one level to shnios arayos, and that's chayve lavim. And that means in the case of chayve lavim, like the case of mamzeres, there would be no knas. Why not? Kedushin HaTovsin, the answer is we're going now not according to Shimon HaTimni, but rather according to Rab Shimon ben Manasseh. And Rab Shimon ben Manasseh is of the opinion that v'lo sia le'isha means isha hara'uya l'kaima, and therefore, in the case of chayve lavim, which is shnius, it's not an isha hara'uya l'kaima. He is not permitted to remain married to her, therefore there's no knas. Whereas according to Shimon HaTimni, who interprets v'lo sia le'isha as yesh ba havaya, there is havaya in the case of chayve lavim, therefore there would be knas. But since the new transmission, the new interpretation of this brisa has it that there's no knas in the case of chayve lavim, then we have to attribute that brisa to Rab Shimon ben Manasseh. Now the Gemara quotes another brisa. By introduction, we should mention that the Mishnah at the beginning of this chapter of Elu Nairos records a machlokus between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim about the status of a ketana. A Ketana, according to the Rabbanon, from the age of 3 all the way into Nairus, which takes her till 12 and a half until she becomes a Bogeres, during that entire period of time, she gets Knas. And the Mishnah records the Shita of Rabbi Meir, who says, no, a Ketana does not get Knas. The Torah mentions Nara, and only Nara. Hamema Enes, Ein La Lo Knas, Velo Pitui. There is no Knas paid, neither in the case of Ma'anes, nor in the case of Mafata. In the case of Mema'enes, which is a young girl who was married off by her mother or by one of her brothers, and she has the opportunity of walking out of that marriage with a statement, a declaration of Miyun, but she's been living with her so-called husband, that's Kedusha D'Rabbanan, for whatever amount of time, and the assumption is that they had consummated that marriage, and therefore she's no longer a Basula. If she's not a Basula, then there's no Knas. But the diuk here that the Gemara is going to suggest is Enes Ein Lo Knas, but as far as being a Ketana is concerned, she would collect Knas. The problem is she's not a Basula. So all the conditions have been met and all the boxes have been checked off except for one, and that is she's not a Basula. Ha Ketana Bi'alma Isla. The implication is that if she would have been a Ketana Basula, she would collect Knas Mani. Who is that Shita? That reflects the Shita Rabbanan, the Amri Ketana Yechla Knas. So we now see that this brisa is a reflection of the Shita of the Rabbanan against Rabbi Meir, because Rabbi Meir holds that a Ketana does not have Knas. And the assumption is that a Mama'enes is Dafka Ketana. Later on, we're going to quote Rabbi Yehuda, and we're going to question that premise. Ema Seifa. Let's look at the end of this price. Islandis, Ein Lo Knas, Velo Pitui. Islandis goes from the state of Katnus directly to the state of Bagrus at the age of 20, and she skips over the state of Narus. However, she is a Ketana, and yet she gets no Knas. We just finished saying that this brisa should be attributed to the Chachamim of Rabbi Meir, who hold at the beginning of this perek that a Ketana collects Knas. So how could it be that you're telling me that an islandess is excluded from Knas? The only possibility is if we introduce the Shita Rabbi Meir, who holds that a Ketana, Yesh Lo Mecher, V'Yein Lo Knas, she doesn't have Knas, and if she doesn't have Knas, then an islandess who's a Ketana by definition until she becomes a Bogeres would not collect Knas. How could the Brisa say that islandess Ein Lo Knas? If you hold like Rabbi Meir, that's wonderful. Bishleim, if you hold like Rabbi Meir, a Ketana doesn't get Knas, therefore it's so facto an islandess doesn't collect Knas, because an islandess has the status of a Ketana. But if you're going to go with the sheet of the Chachamim, then this islandess goes from Katnus all the way to Bagrus, and from the age of 3 until the age of 20, she's a Ketana. According to the Rabbanan, she collects Knas. So we have a very odd situation here, very uncomfortable. The ratio of this brisa that implies that a Ketana does collect Knas reflects the sheet of the Rabbanan. And therefore, Mima Enes, because she's a Psula, she's a Be'ula, she doesn't collect Knas, but insofar as she's a Ketana, she would collect Knas, reflecting the sheet of the Chachamim. And yet, in the Seifa, in the case of Mima Enes, Ein Lo Knas, according to the Chachamim, she should be collecting Knas under the status of a Ketana. Reisha Rabbanan, the Seifa Rabbi Meir, like you read this price, so there's not even a hint, a clue in this price that there's machlokas tanoim here. So the Gemara now tries to reconcile the Reisha and the Seifa. The first attempt is going to be Kula Rabbi Meir. And if it's Kula Rabbi Meir, we understand the Seifa of this price very well. The Mama Enes Ein lo knas, because a katana, according to Rabbi Meir, doesn't collect knas, and islandis is a katana. But what do we do with the Reisha? The Gemara tries to pull off the following move. My NS, Savar lo Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir holds that when Chazal established for a katana shisiu avia v'ima v'kedusha d'Rabbanan, there's miyun. That institution works even after she's a nara, as long as they haven't consummated the marriage post her becoming a nara. Then she could still be mimah enes. And if that be the case, if we're going to make an interdependence between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, then this works out beautifully, because when it says mimah enes ein lo knas, we're not excluding a katana. We're saying mimah enes ein lo knas. She's a nara. You can't be medayik anything about a katana one way or the other. But the Gemara says, I can't accept this. Why not? Umi several of a Tanya going to prove from a brisa. Rabbi Meir rejected Rabbi Yehuda, and he holds that Mimah Enes only applies when she's a kana, but not the moment she becomes a nara. Vatanya ad Masai Abbas Mimah Enes is Rabbi Meir. Ad shetavish de saros. Once she brings simone naros, she leaves the status of a katana, and she becomes a nara. She no longer has the ability of miut. Rabbi Yehuda Omer no. Rabbi Yehuda says even after she has shtei saros and her status is that of a nara, she still has the possibility of miyun if again they haven't consummated the marriage. Until it's absolutely apparent in her physical body that she's changed her situation and she already looks like a more mature woman. In any event, if we take this brisa at face value, we can conclude clearly that Rabbi Meir rejected Rabbi Yehuda. Ella says to the Gemara, let's go the other way around. Let's say that this brisa is attributed to Rabbi Yehuda. Ubiktana savar Rabbi Meir. So how do we now make an integral understanding of this brisa? So we're going to say that this brisa is Rabbi Yehuda. As far as knas is concerned, Rabbi Yehuda holds there's no knas to a katana like Rabbi Meir. And now the brisa fits in very beautifully. If we can assume that Rabbi Yehuda accepts Rabbi Meir that there's no knas to a katana, then the brisa is very smooth. And that is that Mimah Enes in the Reisha is talking about a nara, so we have no indication that a katana does collect knas. And in the Seifa, when we get to the case of islanded, she doesn't collect knas because her status is that of a katana, and Rabbi Yehuda holds like Rabbi Meir. Says the Gemara, that's not true either. Well, me Savarla does Rabbi Yehuda actually accept the shita of Rabbi Meir that a katana is excluded from knas. V'amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, we have a statement in the name of Rav, and this is attached to a Mishnah later on in the fourth parak on Daf Mem, that when it says Ein L'Ktana Knas, it says Zu Divrei Rabbi Meir. Now wait a minute. Why did Rav have to assume that when the Mishnah establishes later on that a Ktana does not collect Knas, it's Rabbi Meir? It's not just Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir is not a lone ranger over here. In Isa, if you're going to hold that Rabbi Yehuda also excludes Katana from Knas, like Rabbi Meir, then Zod Divrei Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda He should have give mention to Rabbi Yehuda as well. It's no longer Das Yachid. That's very important for the Mishnah to mention that there are other Tanoim, at least one that we know of, that agree with Rabbi Meir that a Katana does not collect Knas. And now the Gemara gives what seems to be the most logical solution to this whole problem of reconciling the Reisha and the Seifa. Hai Tana, the author of this brisa, is neither Rabbi Yehuda nor Rabbi Meir, but rather Hai Tana Savarla Rabbi Meir Bechada, Poligale Bechada. He agrees with Rabbi Meir, and this is the Seifa of Islandis, that a Katana doesn't get Knas, hence an Islandis who's a Katana doesn't get Knas. He also adopts the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda namely that a nara could be my NS, and therefore the ratio of this brisa with regard to my NS has nothing to do with Ketana. Rafram Omar, Rafram is going to say that let's go back to our original possibility that the entire brisa is Rabbi Meir. But my mima enes, what does the word mima enes mean? We thought the word mima enes means a woman who is married off by her mother, etc., and she's a kana. No, my mima enes means re'uya l'mayim. So it means the following: we were medayik from mima enes that a ketana has a knas. No. When it says that a ma'enes is excluded from knas, it's referring to any ketana, because we are holding in this brisa the sheet of Rabbi Meir, and if Rabbi Meir is the author of the brisa, then a ketana doesn't get knas. So the word ma'enes means re'uya l'mayin. Who's re'uya l'mayin? Ketana, and that could be Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir doesn't have to hold like Rabbi Yehuda that even a nara is ma'enes. No. As soon as she has taste stars, it's no longer ma'enes. So the Gemara says, wait a minute, come on. You can't be serious. Listening Ketana. What is it? The author of the Brisa didn't understand that the proper and accurate term here is Ketana. Ketana has no knas. Tell me that a Ketana doesn't have knas. Don't go around like this and tell me my Enes is not a knas because she's Re'uya l'mayin Enes and she's a knas. Kasha, the Gemara leaves it shveh. Now we go on to another topic within the category of the various ladies that are enumerated here that don't get knas, and we move on to another dimension of the sugya, and that is tainas besulim. The brisa says, this is the second brisa, not the brisa that we studied until now, that ailonis ein lo knas v'lo pitui. That an ailonis, as we saw before, does not collect knas. So the Gemara says, wait a minute, I have another brisa, Raminu, that says achereshis vashoto ailonis yesh lo knas. The yesh lo tainas besulim. That means he could claim he didn't find it to be a basula, and he could be mafsid ha l'ksuba. So now we have a stira between two brisos about the status of a ketana, because the first brisa says that an ailonis has no knas, and what does that mean? And what does that mean? An ailonis ein lo knas. It means that she's a ketana, and therefore she doesn't collect knas. And now we have a brisa that says ailonis yesh lem knas. This is, pardon the expression, a ridiculous kasha. We know that from the beginning of this perek, Elu Naris, we have on record a machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir, or at least the Rabbanan and Rabbi Meir. And that is whether Ketana collects Knas. We've already proven that according to Rabbi Meir, a Ketana collects Knas. The Rabbanan rejected it. So if you find a steer in Brisos about whether Ketana collects Knas or not, it's clear that this is a machlokas Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim. My Rubia. What kind of Rubia? Rubia means a stira. You're claiming that this is a contradiction. Or Rabbi Meir, or Rabbanon. The brisa that says that Ketana does not collect Knas reflects a shita of Rabbi Meir. Whereas the brisa that says, as we saw the second brisa, that says that, just one second. Vaha, the second brisa, with regard to ailonis, that says that an ailonis doesn't collect knas, implying that a ketana would collect knas, just that an ailonis doesn't collect knas. Rabbanan. So the Gemara says, "Who the kari might kari." Why did this Makshan get all excited about this second brisa? And the Gemara now shifts our emphasis our focal point of our attention to the next part of the brisa, namely Hachereshes Vashota. What's the status of Chereshes and Shota? And here we get into the sugya called Tainas Besul. Mishum de Isle Lemirma Achrite Luya. There's a third brisa. And in the third brisa, it says that Achireshes Vashota Vabogeres Umukas Eitz Ein Lehem Titus Besulin. In these four categories of ladies, we assume that he will not find Dam Besulin. When he comes to Bezdin and says, wait a minute, I anticipated Dam Besulin and I didn't find Dam Besulin, that's called Tinus Besulin, and therefore the whole enterprise here of this marriage is based on false fabrication of the truth, and therefore it's a mekachtos. I thought I was marrying a Basula and I got a Ba'ula. So that's not going to be the case in these four ladies, because these four ladies, he has to know up front when he marries them that he won't find Dam Basula. For example, in a case of Bogeres, that's called Kolu Basulela. When she becomes 12 and a half of Basulin, already are shriveled up. They're disintegrated. There's no Dam there. And Mukas 8, she already had a bang that broke open her Basulin. She doesn't have Dam Basulin anymore. Not only that, we're going to add Chareshes and Shota to this list. Now we're going to have a machlokas about Suma. For our purposes, we're just going to bracket the machlokas about Suma. We'll pick it up later. Let's just read it through and then we'll pick it up later on. Now we want to focus on Chereshes and Shota. A Suma V'Island is according to the Tanakama, this brisa, Yeshlem Titus Besulin, but Sumchas Omer Mishum Rabbi Meir, Suma Ein Lo Tinus Besulin. And as we said before, we're going to analyze that issue about Suma, but leave that out for a minute. Let's focus now our attention on Chereshes and Shota. According to the second brisa of the three brisos, it says Hachereshes Vashota Yeshla Tinus Besul. The fact that she's a deaf mute, or the fact that she's not working in a normal fashion intellectually, that has nothing to do with Dam Besul. And therefore, the first brisa says Yeshlem Tam Besul, Tinus Besul. He married her with the anticipation that she'd be a Besul. And if he finds there's no Dam, and he can prove it, then he could be Mafsid Haliksuba. But the third brisa says Achireshes Vaktana Vashota Elam Titus Besul. He has to assume that she has no Dam Besul. He cannot be Mafsid and say, well, they cheated me. Who cheated you? You should have known that maybe she's not a Basula in terms of Dam Basula. Omar Rav Sheshes Lo Kash. Rav Sheshes says that the issue hinges on whether she's believed in a case where he doesn't find Dam Basulin to claim what's called Nistachva Sadeh. This is a sugya on Daf Yud Gimel in the first parak of Ksubis. And Nistachva Sadeh means that if a person buys a field and unfortunately it was inundated and he lost the field, he cannot claim Mekach Tos. He cannot claim that this is not what I bargained for. The seller sold him a very healthy piece of karka. The fact that it was inundated, that's not the fault of the seller. And the buyer has to bite the bullet and live with that. And if a man is ma'aris and isha, and his chiyuv ksuba is generated at the time of the erusin, he was mischayev to give her a ksubas besula at the time of the erusin. In the meantime, during that 1 year period between erusin and isurin, unfortunately, she had an onus situation. She was raped. And when she comes forward and makes that claim, that after erusin and the chiyuv was set in stone, the pei ksubas masayim, then this tragic onus took place, and that's nistafka sadeu. Is she believed or not? And that's the subject of machlokas between Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yeshua, which revolves around a kind of second-rate migu. It's not the first-rate migu. It's a second-rate migu. We have shar shochet lufanecha, which means that we know that she's not a basula. We have testimony to that effect. Now she's coming to say, well, it happened during Erison and not through any fault of my own. It was circumstances beyond my control. Comes along Rabbi Elazar and says, you know what? We're going to believe her. She has a little bit of a mixas migu. She could have claimed that the onus took place earlier without postling her for kahuna. Instead, by her own admission, she confesses that after Erison, she had an onus situation which makes up psul kuna b'torah zona, and therefore we should believe her. That's Rabbi Gamliel's shita. Then we have Rabbi Yeshua, the dissenting view. He says, Lo mi pianu chayim. We're not going to believe her. So the Gemara says, is that what you're talking about? Whether Chereches and Shota are believed to explain that Misharas Tani and Nasti? When did Rabbi Gamliel say we believe her? She put forward the claim. But who's going to put forward this claim on behalf of a woman who's a lav hardas? She's a shota or a chereshes. And now the Gemara invokes a very famous principle all over Nezikin. We have a principle of psach picha le'ilem, otherwise known as taininin liyasme, which means that Bezdin, based on this pasuk in Mishlei, will put forward a claim on behalf of someone who they themselves could not have put forward the claim. So you have a plaintiff who's suing the defendant. The defendant is incapable of putting forward the claim. Why? Because the claim was really against his father, but his father died. He doesn't know what the counterclaim is. Or you have a case of a lover who's out in Medina Sayyam. He cannot make a claim to defend himself and say, Parati. In the case of a shota or a chereshes, she doesn't have the capacity to put forward a claim. But if she has a winning claim in her back pocket, which of course she's not aware of, then Bezda becomes her best lawyer and will put forward that claim. And now we go back to the Brisa. The Brisa says that al Bogeres ein lo tainis b'sul. We don't anticipate that to be dam as a result of Be'ila Rishona in the case of Bogeres. She's already past 12 and a half, kol b'sulel. So the Gemara immediately asks, V'omar Rav Bogeres nosula Laila Rishon. The question is whether she's saying Dam Nida and she's Asura Labaila, or she's saying Dam Besulin, which is not Dam Nida and she's Muteris Labaila. So we give her the first night, says Rav. Any Dam that she sees during the first night, throughout the entire night, will be assumed to be Dam Besulin, and she's not Tmeya Betumas Nida Labaila. But we see clearly that after Bilas Mitzvah, in a case of Bogeres, Rav anticipates that at least for the first night, she will see Daf Besulin. So why are you telling me Ein Latainis Besulin? And here we turn to Daf Lamed Vav Lamed Beis.